Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about SQL injection, one of the most common exploits and vulnerabilities at the same time found on various web applications, websites, everywhere where you have user input, there might be room for mistake, and we can actually found this via different queries, errors, triggering the database to spin out something that we can leverage later on. So now we will start with overview of SQL injection and then a little bit of history about it. What is SQL injection? As I said, it is unauthorized user input sent directly to the database from the web server and tricking the database to give us valuable information about different tables, columns, maybe usernames, passwords, addresses, emails, all kinds of NPPI. In order to trigger such vulnerability and exploit it, there has to be something done in the background while the application was still in development. Maybe the developers forgot to put proper validation, maybe they forgot to put proper sanitization, and they're actually letting web server send all the input without further validation to the database, and the database returns whatever is queried by the user. There might be different other options as let's say blind SQL injection, waiting for the server to time out, just put some conditions in there to see if the query that we put is actually executed without any visible traces. And we can actually check that later on. We're going to be talking about different types of SQL injection and how to, in general terms, how to exploit those. Now let's move on to the history part and see when SQL injection was first found and when it was used for malicious purposes or maybe just for tricking, playing games, competition between schoolmates, and things like that. SQL injection was first found over 20 years ago, and this was actually when it was publicly disclosed, which means that unofficially it was found years back. Let's say I would guess between 20 and 25 years ago, or just let's say when the first web application or website was spin up. I'm talking about web applications working with a database in the background. Then I'm pretty sure soon after there was the SQL injection discovery right away, because people have the tendency to find flaws and find ways to break stuff before even learn how to build those. So SQL injection is typically used by hackers, ethical hackers, security auditors. When I say hackers, we can divide those in three main groups. Black hats, which will be the malicious hacker, gray hats, which are still malicious, but maybe they don't use the information for personal profit so much. And then we have the white hat hackers, which are basically paid by the owner of the website to get that information, test stuff, try to break into different websites, web applications, bypass security controls, and see how basically the application is developed, find the flaw, exploit it, or maybe just find it and report it to the client. It could be you testing your own website, web application. Um, it could be consulting work. It could be various things. It could be even participating in capture the flag competition, which is basically gathering flags via solving different problems, hacking things, and collecting, as I say, so-called flags, which will be maybe password, maybe number, name, whatever the creators of the specific CTF have prepared for us. Yeah, guys, definitely, we can say that it's the most easy way to hack. Those are words of pseudonymous hacker, a worm who was responsible for the Wall Street Journal hack. Uh, and The attack this way took him just few hours. So definitely we can say that this is really time efficient and easy to exploit vulnerability, depending of course on the structure of the web application, also network architecture and everything behind it. We can say that SQL injection was possibly first documented by Jeff Forrestal in the Hacker Zine Prac. Back then, Forrestal went by the handle rain.forest.puppy, but he is now CTO of mobile security and cybersecurity vendor. So we can say that this was the first documented SQL article. SQL means also, the acronym means Structured Query Language, is a programming language used to manage databases. In essence, it's used when a website needs to call up a piece of information from its database, either to process it or present it to a user. But Forrestal had found that typing certain commands would force a server to review information stored on it. People can possibly piggyback SQL commands, he wrote in his article. So, in the December of 1998 issue of Prac, Forrestal wrote about a series of issues with a version of Microsoft SQL Server. When Forrestal's fellow researcher told Microsoft of the problems, their answer was, well, hilarious. He wrote, according to them, what you're about to read is not a problem, so don't worry about doing anything to stop it. Definitely, as we can see here, and we learn from the history, people are not taking serious problems which are just found, stuff like 0 days. Uh, but I can say that in the past few years, companies are becoming really good at it, meaning that they try to be cautious and they try to be responsible and proactive in finding vulnerabilities, patching them, improving their policies, their vulnerability management programs. And things are becoming better and better in the cybersecurity field because, of course, hackers are becoming more efficient. They're finding new ways. They're, of course, smarter. They have more resource, financial resource, hardware resource than an average security team. So definitely, we can say that a competition between and the chasing between hackers and cybersecurity professionals has led to improvements on both sides. So this was more or less the overview of the history of SQL injection. Now we move forward to the types of SQL injection. We can classify the different SQL injection types in two different ways. Order-wise is the first way. In order-wise type of classification, we can see a few different types of attacks. The first one will be first order injection attack. In this attack, the malicious actor receives the desired result right away, either by a direct response from the web application they're interacting with, or other response mechanisms and ways of interacting, like email, etc. Second type of order-wise SQL injections is called second order injection attack. In this attack, the attacker relies on malicious input stored on the database for later use, which means that the realization and the success of the malicious query injected into the web application is not activated immediately by the web server. This type of injection is used to indirectly trigger the SQLI, which is used at later time in order to escalate the attack. In this case, you think of different things that might be injected, maybe some information about user, maybe changing of the password, maybe something that will be triggered by the application itself with the help of a user, in this case the attacker. Just storing something that could be invoked and help us leverage the attack further. Next type of SQL injection would be called lateral injection attack. In this case, we are actually attacking Oracle databases, and the attack takes advantage of some common data types, including number and date, which do not take user input, thus they're considered normally not considered to be exploitable. In such database can be manipulated and exploited by an attacker just by the use of some creating coding, and of course this would take a lot of time and will be really time consuming for people which are not familiar with Oracle databases. To be honest, you can play with it in testing environment, or maybe if you have such database in use, you can learn more about it and try to do it yourself. It's good to have some development background, so it will be easier to do, or coding background, of course. So it will be easier to develop some custom queries, scripts, maybe a little program that will do the job for you. But that is really advanced technique, which you might not use in many cases. If you like to try it, best of luck. Let me know how it goes. The next type of SQL injection attack here will be the classical one. In this one, the exploitation of SQL database provides the opportunity to merge two different SQL statements. This is a really complex way to interact with the database, and you can get additional information about a specific table, column. Basically, you have a really powerful query that can do the job for you, get you the information needed, and then help you move forward with further queries or further attacks. Next one will be the blind SQL injection attack. When a web application is susceptible to SQL injection, but the actual result of the injection is hidden, then we're talking about blind SQL injection. We rely on other means of response from the database. It won't be a displayed page. It could be different from the original one. It could be time-based. Maybe you're putting condition for true or false, and if it's true, the page would will pause the load for 10 seconds or n amount of seconds. If it's false, it will load right away. Things like that. You're asking, putting some conditions in there and see if it's true, you're going to get one result. If not, you're going to get the other result. Usually those type of injection takes more knowledge, and you would need more time to play with them. Once you get good at it, it will be really beneficial for you as a maybe cybersecurity professional or just enthusiast, pen tester. To be honest, being able to exploit and work with blind SQL injection is really rare. Not many people can do that. And your skills will be very valuable for a team of security experts or just for yourself or your personal use. Moving forward, I can divide or just give you different types of blind SQL injection here. The first one will be the standard blind. Sometimes there is a possibility to exploit an SQL injection vulnerability just by the use of classical hacker techniques that involve application of union, operator, and separator. In this case, standard blind SQL injection is actually implemented, and it will allow an attacker to write and read files, get data from different tables, provided only the entries are read symbol by symbol. This kind of attack can further be classified as, and here we have few examples or few classification sections. The classical based blind SQL injection. This one, the attack is in this one the attack is actually based on detailed analysis of true and false. I mentioned this prior, so you can use those true false expressions to get the right answer, a valid answer of your question. If specific statement is true, it will return one thing, and if it's false, it will return another thing. So you're basically asking yes or no questions. You're asking the database yes or no questions in order to get to the point where you actually know everything needed to move forward with your attack. The next type of such blind SQL injection will be the error-based. Here we have the quickest technique of exploiting a database via SQL injection. The bulk of methods of exploitation here is getting valuable information out of error messages. Those error messages are triggered by sending illegal SQL expression to the database. This technique um, can be leveraged if any error of SQL expression processing occurred in the database is actually returned back to the vulnerable web application. This one is one of my favorites, and basically, uh, you get once you get the first error, you can feel really happy about it, and then see how you can tweak your query in order to get all the information needed within that error message. Now we're moving forward to the double-blind SQL injection. That one includes technique in which all error messages and vulnerable SQL queries are excluded from the web page returned by the application, and the results do not influence in any way the returned web page. Exploitation of this kind of SQL vulnerability uses simply time delays under SQL query, which means that it will give you the response via the seconds or the time that you put in for delaying the loading of the page, let's say. This way you can ask the database different questions, and based on the delay, a time-based delay, you can get your answer out of it. That one is pretty cool once you get it to work. You can play using different vulnerable web applications online or setting up one yourself, as I mentioned before. It's a fun one to play with. Moving forward, we're going to be looking into the second type of SQL injection classification, which is called against the database.